Good. So, hello everybody, and welcome to this month's installment of ClueCon Plus or ClueCon Live. It's got a couple different names, but it's always the same event. We try to bring someone from the open source community that has a long history with it, and we like to discuss what the past was, what the future, what the present is, and what the future could be. This month actually with us we have Emil Ivov, old friend of everybody in the open source RTC community, as the founder, I think, of Jitsi, right?
That is the case. Hi, Luca. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Was now the 8x8, and well, yeah. First of all, Emil, nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Nice to see you, mate. Good to see
Have-
you.
Haven't been able to meet in person because of all the things that are going on, but who knows? Next FOSDEM, maybe.
Yes, whenever that's going to happen.
Yeah, I hope they. I mean, everybody's hoping it happens soon, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, for the few people that don't know you, Emil, would you like to introduce yourself just a little?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. Those who know me here know me because I'm involved in Jitsi. It's a project that I started 18 years ago. Um, it's funny when we started at that point. I was telling that story recently. It was an experiment that I was doing as a student project, and I wanted to write a phone that works in a computer. I knew nothing about that. In fact, that remained the case for probably the next several years. I was in the sweet portion of the Dunning-Kruger curve, where I thought I knew everything. And I remember arriving. So this was happening within the context of my master's degree, and I remember arriving at my advisor's desk. And I said, look, I made this thing. It can do calls with MSN Messenger because it was using SIP back then. That felt really good, by the way, to be able to, you're just a student, you're a nobody, and you write this thing and it can talk to a tool that was created from a corporation. And that wasn't intended to talk to you, right? It was just kind of hacking your way around. It felt really good. So I'm the king of the world, and I go to him and I say, it can do audio video calls with MSN Messenger. We're pretty much 80% done at this point. So I suppose for the next 18 years, we've been working on the remaining 20%. That's how it all got started anyway.
Yeah, I remember Jitsi was a completely different software when it started out. Like when I first started using Jitsi, which was a long time ago. I think I've been using Jitsi for 12 plus years at this point. It was a desktop client, right? Kind of like Blink or Bria or stuff like that, right? It was just a zip. It has no server components. That's correct.
It originally did not. Now you're right. Originally, it has changed many times actually
Mhm.
through the years, and that is something that I could show, I guess. But originally, it had this silly interface where there was a huge logo in one corner and some stupid table in the other end, and it's like I'm looking at this today and thinking, how on earth did I think that made any sense at all from a user interface perspective? But it could make calls. Anyways, it was a client, and since then it has changed many times. It became more of an instant messenger at one point. Then it became more of a video client thing. Then it became a server thing when we exported part of the code and made it run on servers. This is when it became Jitsi Video Bridge as well. And then
Mhm.
the remaining front end, we then switched with JavaScript. And the interesting bit here is that through the years, I think that's one of the reasons we're still around, that we've gone multiple times through this process of entirely burning ourselves to the ground and then reusing the ashes, the pieces to build something new. There is still code that runs in Jitsi Video Bridge today that was written 15 years ago.
Oh.
Not much, right? There's more that was written 10 years ago and even more that was written 5 years ago. But there's still some of those ashes, some of the DNA from the very first versions. And I think that's an approach that it's kind of unavoidable in life. We don't the world is a complicated place to figure out. You don't really know what will work and what wouldn't. The only chance that you have is, you make a choice, you go after it, and you have to be willing to readjust yourself once you realize that you're not getting where you want to be. You could take these conversations to many places from here. You could take it from you could during the pandemic, we had this we had the opportunity to help a lot of people through Jitsi. A bunch of people came and started using us as a for those of you who don't know what Jitsi is, by the way, it's probably best known through the Meet Jitsi website. You can just go and have video conferences there with no account, and many people appreciated that opportunity. And so we when the COVID pandemic started, we obviously usage exploded, and many more people, however, were using proprietary tools from Microsoft and Zoom, and I had no problem with that. However, many people were concerned, specifically European authorities, were perceiving that to be an issue, and they were getting, public officials were getting pressured from their communities. And are we comfortable that we rely on a foreign nation with all these key aspects of our daily life? So many of that ended up trickling down to me. There were various officials from the European Commission, from embassies, who ended up getting in touch, and they were saying, how is it that there's no European tool that does these same things? Maybe we should do a program and we should build one. And I was thinking, well, that's why there isn't, right? Because you think of the problem that way, because you think that solutions in this world arrive by mandate. You're just going to, create a program. That's kind of a catchphrase. It's especially something that works with developers, I would say. We kind of think that, yeah, sure, we just have to create this rule here. We have to type the algorithm and the problem will solve itself. Well, no. That's not how it works. Because, for all of those tools that you're currently worried about, for every for every Zoom, for every Teams, for every Jitsi or FreeSWITCH project, there's 1,000 others that failed. And that failure didn't just end up, evaporating efforts. Those people learned stuff. The people that were watching them learned stuff. The investors that invested in them learned stuff. And that knowledge remained in the ecosystem. And people were able to build better tools and learn from those mistakes. And that's why today the successful tools that exist do exist. But then when you look at Europe, that requires a certain amount of comfort with failure. You have to know that maybe you're going to have to change jobs more recently than you'd like to. It's going to be uncomfortable. And I think the way that legislature in Europe has gone has been in a direction of, let's protect ourselves as much as possible from that discomfort. Because, when you have a family and let's say only one of the parents work and they lose their job, and now the family maybe has to relocate. Oh my God, that's pretty inconvenient. So you know what? Let's make it very hard for people to fire their employees. That's going to solve the problem. Except that no, it doesn't. It actually makes it harder for people to go and commit to hiring new resources, because it makes it a bigger commitment. And
it's like marrying someone to hire someone in many countries in Europe.
I think marrying is actually paradoxically easier, because especially in places like France, you have these contracts now that you can sign and dissolve very easily. So yeah, I would argue that marrying is easier in Europe than hiring someone. It's easier to dissolve that sort of a marriage than a work contract.
That's so right. That's
yeah. So I don't even know where I started from, but it's I was talking about the ability to be able to reinvent yourself and at some point to realize quickly. I saw this it was a book written about product management by Marty Keegan, I think was the name of the author. And he said that good product creators don't fall in love with the solution, they fall in love with the problem. And they're able to recognize that a solution doesn't really fit a problem very quickly. And that's what makes them good. That ability to reevaluate that the direction that you're going is not really the one that you had chosen, and you need to, go down, rebuild things, come back up again.
Oh,
that was a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, that's I mean, that is certainly a history of many successful projects. So I think Jitsi has changed more than most. Like FreeSWITCH has been around for a long time, but it hasn't changed.
What are you talking about? What do you mean it hasn't changed? Look at what we're using and think about what FreeSWITCH was like 10 years ago.
Well,
like none of this existed.
FreeSWITCH wasn't a desktop SIP client, though, so it's it changed proportionally less in a sense than.
But now it has a client, right? We're using a client now, and it was only a server. I mean, so I think you can absolutely say that about FreeSWITCH as well, that it has reinvented itself in many ways as well. It has become a service now, a cloud service. It was an open source, a set of lines of code, and now it is a service that runs on the cloud. It's a lot of reinvention there, I would say.
So what fascinated me about your long-winded answer is you mentioned failed projects. I think that in the last few years, that's probably a feeling I have, but I think in the last few years, we've seen more and more open source projects die out. Mm-hmm. And what do you think? Is that, first of all, do you think that is the case? Is there more of a higher number of projects that just flame out and stop being supported? Is it just a feeling I have? And what makes an open source project fail?
Well, I don't know what it really means for an open source project to fail. What I've seen is many open source projects that actually failed to ever become anything. I guess there's something in our ecosystem where there's been a variety of clients that are kind of still like SIP clients specifically that are in a stage that's almost dormant, and we can talk about that. I think that's an interesting topic and something that specifically the arrival of WebRTC combined with this cloud world that we live in right now has implied that this separation of client and server, that separation of roles that used to exist in the past, that's gone. It's just not a thing anymore. And where it is still a thing, it's on the way. It's some niches, and people have maybe managed to capture some of these niches. But overall, I think that that's a thing in the past, and we can trace it all the way back to how when telephony was created, it was a thing of it was a thing of telecoms and their endpoints. And then those telecoms had a certain reach, and they needed to be able to extend that reach. Your Italian telecom had to talk to my Bulgarian or French telecom, so those interconnections needed to happen. That was only possible to happen because they could agree on the sort of stuff that was going to happen in between them. And it wasn't that hard to agree because, hey, it's just going to be audio, right? So I mean, how hard is that? And then when we first created VoIP, we followed the same model. Email followed the same model. And then because we had that stable ground, stable basis, we could say, well, two things. First of all, the people who are building the things at the edges, the endpoints, they have to be able to talk to the people who are maintaining the network. So we have to work on standards. And we have to be able to agree on what those standards are going to look like. So we need the standards bodies or things that are not admitting to be standards bodies, but are actually standards bodies, like the IETF. And we need to go all argue and agree on things before they happen. And you had no choice around it, just because at the core of it, you had the telecoms. And even when IP telephony started becoming a thing, everyone knew that unless you're able to link into real telecoms, the utility of this was going to be limited. And however, we also at that point, put the first nail in the coffin of telephony, because the need to connect to these telecoms just came from the sheer volume of services that of users that they were servicing. The more the people on the internet side were growing, the less that interconnection was necessary. And as things grew, we arrived at this at this point of enough people connected to just consuming voice and video services through exclusively through the internet, that enabled individual providers to actually go and innovate faster because they didn't need to agree with other people exactly what every feature is going to look like. That enabled things like different sorts of video conferencing, embedded video in all sorts of things, all sorts of monitoring, just the WhatsApps and the telegrams and the signals just spurting in every direction. And that was only possible because for the first time in history, you were able to offer global reach by yourself. You didn't need to rely on interconnections with other people. You needed no agreements. You could reach any point, any person, anywhere around the world with this service that you've built with two other people. And the minute that happened, that obsoleted standardization, because you can now do everything, so you don't need to agree with other people. And it also obsoleted the whole client-server separation that we had going in the VoIP community. And I think some open source projects in the telecommunications space specifically ended up paying that price. Now, other open source projects are obviously victims of other things. You for example, one of the things that you and I have talked about is, back in the early 2000s, open source was quite the religion. Do you remember those days?
I do, certainly, yeah. It was much different. You had people just yelling at you because you were not using fully open source software. A single line of code will be contention for 200 emails on a mailing list, and there's a lot. Yeah, of course, that's a feeling that I feel like it's gone. That's for probably good. I mean,
I don't know that it's gone, but you're right. There's much less of it. I certainly remember this condescending attitude from unless you're running fully open source software for every little thing that you use, which means that your printer never works, and you compile your own kernels and things like that. You're really not worth the conversation. It was very that attitude was very pervasive, and you can certainly understand where it's coming from. So if you go into open source, I guess it goes to the reasons of why would anyone go into open source? Why would anyone deal with open source? And if your reason is because I believe that that's a basis for a new form of society, then okay, fine. I can kind of see where you're coming from, and you can keep hoping that that this is going to overtake. But there are certain things that you haven't really thought through, like exactly how putting bread on the table is going to work, and exactly how are you going to make sure that the open source projects, the projects that solve your problem the most, continue living, right? Because they're going to need the resources. How are they going to get these resources so that you can keep relying on them? And as people realizing these issues, I think more and more people became more comfortable with the connection between money and open source. But I'll tell you this, there's one thing that's really amazing about open source. And I realized that when we were struggling with money, one of the ways that were common in Europe to try and get money was to participate in these large European projects. That was quite a thing. So the way that used to work is, there's some intention announced by the European Commission. It's a lot like a planned economy thing. Like it's like, well, we think that it is important for Europe to work in that direction. We think that those are problems that were worth taxpayers' money. So companies, go do that. And companies don't really care about the intention of the European Commission. All they care about is, paying their employees and increasing their profits, like all companies. So it's like, the things that we're doing, how could we kind of present them in a way that match what the European Commission want to do? So they and then they start thinking, the European Commission would come and say, oh, and by the way, companies, we want to make sure that you include other companies from these European companies in order to have better, because that's the fair way of distributing money. And we want to make sure that You have universities, because universities we have to find a reason to give money to universities, and you have to have small companies. It has to be very representative of the entire ecosystem in Europe. And so you ended up spending enormous amounts of effort trying to build this consortium. Do we have such a company? Do we have such a university? Do we have that other company? Do we have those other people? And then these people, I remember this, these people ride together, and they are, at this point, the divergence in interest that all of these people have is tremendous. Everyone wants to build their own thing. They're just here for the damn money, right? But they have to pretend that they're all playing the same game. So they start writing, I remember these huge European project proposals that we go and write, like 200 pages. And everyone's editing stuff, and everyone's trying to sneak their little thing in here and in there. And that takes months. And then someone goes and presents it to the European Commission, and it has a 20% chance of being approved. And I was thinking back then, Jesus Christ, just trying to create these collaborations with those companies. It's such a complicated thing. And when you compare it to what happens in the open source world, where, well, you have a thing, it's there. If you want to come and help. Here are the terms. There's a license. By the way, I think that's one of the best things about open source, is that very early on, people like Richard Stallman, I'll give him credit for that, took care of acknowledged the fact that the terms and the contributions of the terms of the contribution had to be very clear. The terms of distribution had to be very clear. Now, there was a lot of disagreement about exactly what these terms should be, but the fact that everyone agreed, hey, we cannot just put this code out there. It has to be very clear under what conditions it is made available to other people. That was probably one of the most successful decisions that was made in the world of open source, because then everyone, not only just small individual contributors, but big companies, could go look at the terms, kind of make a call. Yeah, that works. No, that doesn't work. And if it does work, we're going to take it, use it, contribute back to it. And that's really what made the success of open source. So to finish this, again, long-winded answer, I think the primary advantage, the primary reason why open source works is because it tremendously facilitates collaboration under any shape. It could be just, I'm creating and you're using, and then after some amount of time, maybe you'll pay me something, maybe you'll contribute something back, maybe you'll spread the word so that someone else comes in and pays me something. That facilitated collaboration that open source brings to the world is absolutely marvelous. That's why I love open source. And we can talk about the developer advantages and the fact that, well, when you work on open source, your code is yours forever. When you leave the company that you work for, you don't have to put all of that behind you. You can go work on the same thing on your own as a consultant for another company. So then there's many more.
There's a lot. You're very right. The licensing, licensing has been a discussion forever. Like every day, still some mailing list. I'm on the Debian internals mailing list because of some stuff I did in the past. And half of it is still politics. And I've been on that mailing list for, I think, 20 years now. And it's been 20 years of politics. Like everybody just says, we should include this package because one of the dependencies once had a different license than GPL. Not now, add one. Like it used to have a different license. So it makes it super, at the same time, though, you're totally right. Having defined the playing field very early allowed people to work in comparatively relaxed. You will know that people will not steal your stuff because there was some license protecting you. Even though, I'll be honest, sometimes you realize it's part of the and that's something actually I'd like to discuss with you. We are both part of, well, you are more of a part, I'm a smaller part of the FreeSWITCH project. We're all part of projects who have a lot of usage out there, and sometimes those projects are used by large companies and they don't even tell you they're doing that, or they're just not, they're not contributing, they're not doing anything for that. I think that's par for the course, but we probably didn't spend enough, and that's expected. Like, it's out there for free, so why will not you use it for free if it works for you? Same time, too, I think we didn't do enough work on explaining to especially those large corporations that open source projects only exist if they get a little bit of help.
Yeah. Yes. So I would say,
sure there's a lot of people out there using Jitsi that large people, very large companies using Jitsi, and they never even told you.
there's probably some of that. Most of the time they do tell us, just as I'm sure that oftentimes they tell you folks as well that they're using you. And it's kind of, it's great that you're raising this, because it's very complicated.
It is.
From one perspective, it's, look, you decided to put that code out there. No one forced you. You said that it's available under those terms, and we're using it under those terms. So what's your problem, right? You could absolutely have that view, and that's entirely legitimate. But that's kind of like saying, I'm walking on the street, and then I see someone else, and it's just the two of us on the street, and they pass me, and I say, hi. And the other person doesn't respond. And we just continue. And you could say, that person did absolutely nothing illegal. They owed it. They didn't owe it to you to salute you. Like they're not your kid or anything. They'll do whatever they want. And yeah, fair enough. They're still a dick though. And it's kind of the same. One of it is, what am I allowed and not allowed to do? And one of it is having good manners. And I think especially bad manners is when certain companies will take, I'm sure that has happened to you and it's happened to us as well. So they would take our stuff. Sorry, I don't mean that. It's not that they're taking our stuff. They're using the projects that we've made available.
Which they can use.
Yes. And then they're going to go and launch services based very heavily on these projects. And then they're going to put marketing out there that says, we're launching this incredible, innovative service for the first time in the world. Come and use our service. And there will be no mention of the fact that, they're essentially just rebranding an existing open source project. So, look, you're allowed to do that, just as when you're playing soccer and someone touches you and you fall on the ground and you pretend that you're suffering the pain of the biggest pain of your life, and just to get the attention of the what do you call of the referee. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's really illegal, but it's dickishness, right? So don't be a dick. If you're going to be an open source, don't be a dick. Be polite, be cool, and the way to be cool is you actually implied that if you really mean this, if that service means anything to you, and you want to be able to keep offering it 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, it is good hygiene to go and make sure to go and poke around and see these things that you really depend on. What do they need in order to keep existing?
Yeah.
Some of them are going to take money for consulting. Some of them could use some help within their communities, triaging bugs. Some of them would appreciate the extra publicity. Whatever it is, just engage a little bit. Do what you have to. Even spreading the word, even just giving credit to where is this coming from is good behavior, and it's appreciated. You're not required to do it. It's not the law. It's not in the license, but it's like saying hi in the street. You're just being a nice person. Does that resonate with what you think?
Yeah, I feel like that's I think I wouldn't say failed, but what we didn't do enough is actually spread the message you just gave to companies, executives on LinkedIn, on whatever channels that people frequent, mostly because most people from the open source communities will live in our own world for the most part. Like even up to, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, before I really joined, before I joined SecondWire, but even a couple of years before, I was doing a lot of management and design. So I was living in a different world. But up to 5 or 6 years ago, I was a pure developer. So we're just sitting down in front of my computer. I'd talk to other developers. I'd fly to Brussels and drink too many beers at 9 a.m. with you in the morning before a talk or stuff like that. And but that has changed. Like, I used to not meet anyone who wasn't a developer. So I didn't even have the idea, the chance of say, you will see. So, but that's probably the
Yeah, man.
problem. We haven't been out there enough. So that's a work we need to do. We need to let the companies know that open source projects need even just publicity. Like someone saying, a large company saying, yes, we use Jitsi or we use FreeSWITCH, goes a very long way. It costs them nothing, and it gives a lot of leverage. Of course, consulting, bounties, etc. If they have bounties, that's just great. Like, we'll give you $5,000 for this feature. That's super. That's probably the best way to accelerate the project, in my opinion.
Yeah,
That
it is indeed one good way, and you know, some people are doing that. We recently had this hackathon with the European Commission, so I'll say this as well because I gave them some flack, and they do good things too. So they're very good people there. Like, they reached out to us and they said, hey, you know, we consider this important, and we'd like to help you, and we're probably going to be able to put some money out there. We're thinking of helping you organize a hackathon and spreading the word, and then doing all the procedures around the hackathon. And that was marvelous. That was we didn't they did a lot of work. They provided the resources for prizes. That's good citizenry. I'm happy that institutions like the European Commission are doing such things. That's it's absolutely fantastic. And you know, similar things happen in the United States as well. It's great. Now, how exactly do you make sure that you reduce the amount of improper behavior? That's complicated. I think you're right. You have to first say it out loud. Meet with the non-developers, maybe tell them a little bit about it without monopolizing the conversation for the entire evening, maybe. But you also, you know, as you walk on the street, there are always going to be people that don't respond back when you say hi, and
yeah,
that's
it's always
the way it is.
Yeah, not all of it can be eliminated for sure. That's a given. Oh, by the way, just something. FOSDEM is held in Brussels, in Belgium, where it's perfectly normal to serve beer in the morning. So don't worry about that.
We're not alcoholics. It's normal. It's normal,
it's
and also
it's gluten.
It's gluten free, so it's okay.
Yeah, they have this cherry beer. You ever had that? I think I don't know. I don't even know how much I drank.
Yeah, that was my problem too. That I didn't know how much I drank of it until it started coming back out. And
yeah,
I've actually, one of the FOSDEMs that I remember was that because they had these delirium parties in delirium tremens cafe, and at one point I remember it was my third or fourth FOSDEM where it was so bad that I actually missed the entire next day of the conference.
Yeah.
Which is like, well, Emil, you know, social activities and everything, but you probably need to quit because you're here for the conference. It's good to at least attend. But those are part of the things we learn, I suppose.
Yeah. So ClueCon is a great conference, and I hope we can have you there.
Oh, it is absolutely. I love
it. It's more technical, more focused. It's more of a serious conference. FOSDEM has its serious moments, but it's a gathering of like 5,000 open source developers of all kinds. So the talks are great, but I remember showing up at 9, and Matt Jordan from at the time Digium was moderating the room. It was the first slot of the second day, and it was me, him, and one guy sitting in the last row who was clearly just doing something else.
Yeah.
Like just programming or whatever. And I actually started talking because those were being recorded. So we didn't have time. I couldn't delay because we had to record that slot. And that was the first and only time I spoke for about half an hour to an empty room. It was so weird. Like it's never happened
again. And I actually think that is one of the most impressive things that you guys did, that the FreeSWITCH community did. Early on, is to put so much effort on ClueCon to kind of show, because that was the views. Obviously, it was the views to the FreeSWITCH team because it was spreading the word, but it was also a message out there it was gathering a lot of content to many of the professional users of FreeSWITCH to help them move along with their business. I think that was a tremendous idea and very well executed. And every time that I had come to ClueCon, it was extremely professional, within the spirit of open source, it was never, no one was taking themselves too seriously, but it was still, sorry, phone. Yeah, it's a very nicely executed event.
We have some of the people here who are in charge of ClueCon. So
I know, I
Sharon,
recognize
Benny,
the
and all the other
faces.
guys, and
Absolutely
all the other
great
people,
job.
and they do a great job. Absolutely,
They
it's
do.
just fantastic. I help out too. Of course, I've been sure, but even when I was just a speaker, I remember it's the only conference when I will just show up to speak, and all I needed to do was be there at the right time. It was literally nothing else to do. Everything would just run perfectly, and everything will be on time. Everything will be great, and that's mostly, well, I think everybody gets credit, but Sharon gets more of it. Like Sharon White which being the Sharon White School of Management, we call it, which is composed of a single sentence: "You do it now." Whatever that is, you just go there and do it, whatever it is.
That's only for you, Luca. Only for you.
Thank you. That's it. When we do the strike time, when it's time to bring everything down from the conference and just leave, that's just military style training. Like it just kicks in and you just know what you have to do and just do it.
Gotta be fast. Yep. Gotta be fast.
It's awesome. So
well, you most of all have to take it seriously, and which you guys were. You know, the FOSDEM mentality was more like there. And there are a lot of people that do a lot of work at FOSDEM. But there's always been, look, it's your event, it's y'all's event, so you volunteers have to keep making sure that whatever you want to happen is happening. But then when you have a bunch of volunteers that you put so much responsibility on, you're inevitably going to end up with some rather diverse expectations and motivations of what the event is supposed to be like. And that has its charm, but it also gives you exactly what you described. You have this feeling of a little bit, this is more of a thing created by enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And that feels great.
Yep.
But if I'm here to solve professional problems that the bread on my table depends on, it's not exactly what I'm looking for. Let's put it that way. It's a great place to go and look for inspiration, because there's a lot of chaos, and inspiration always comes out of chaos. And you just, I had never thought about this thing. Maybe I could use it next time. And then there's the other thing, which is, hey, there's a running business. I have specific problems that I want to solve. Maybe some new ideas as well, but it's within very specific context. And then ClueCon is the sort of event that I want to attend.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. FOSDEM is something that my idea about FOSDEM is it's kind of like a holiday for weird people like us. Like we go there to have fun. It's our idea of fun, which is very different from the idea of fun that normal people have. But still, it's you go there, you hear about. I remember watching talks about the most diverse and things that I've never even thought or known about, like anything from AI to even just networking. I remember the almost birth of Docker in Europe over there, like the first days of Docker and containerization. Everybody was trying to roll their own open source version before Docker sort of standardized the thing. And that's where a lot of ideas came from, you're right. But it's still more of a fun thing. Yeah. So speaking of which, there's something that, probably the last topic, but I really like to pick your brain about what do you think about community management. Community management in open source has always been a hard topic, and there's at least two different schools of thought. One is everybody has a say, and then you wait what people are doing. The other school of management is generally nobody can say anything, and everybody's always wrong. I'm not saying the latter is bad. Like I've seen the most open source projects are managed with an iron fist. So you think
I'm not sure which way you're leaning then, because you're obviously describing two extremes, though, and I would say neither of them work. And I'm not sure I understood you about which one you felt you preferred, but I would say that certainly FreeSWITCH is neither of those extremes.
No, FreeSWITCH is not. It leans more towards a close-knit group of core developers, and that's probably the right weight.
Yes. Look, I'll say this: the only way an open source project community can can work is if it's based on meritocratic principles. Period. Nothing else will work. If you just come and express your opinions and you expect that they would mean something, if actually a community is striving to accommodate that goal, it is doomed. It's not going anywhere because there's an endless amount of opinions and there's an endless amount of problems, and everyone wants their problem solved the way they need it solved, right? If you go and try to address things from that perspective, well, good luck to you. Like unless you're planning on building 7 billion projects so that everyone's needs are accommodated, then you're going to fail. And on the other hand, the complete dictatorial solution isn't going to work for the same reason that one solution is not going to work for everyone. What you decided initially is going to make things very hard for other people. So that diversity that prevents you from having absolute freedom, that diversity of needs, also prevents you from having the absolute tyrannical approach. So I would say a community is a constant game of negotiation with your contributors. It's a constant trying to gauge, okay, how interested, how much really that is a problem. Like it's completely normal, for example, for you to ask for something and to get an immediate no. And that's normal because at this point, I'm just trying to assess how important it is to you. And then maybe you leave it there. Maybe you keep complaining, in which case maybe just your feelings were hurt or something. Doesn't matter much. But then if you come back and say, okay, maybe you don't do it that way, but what if you do half of this? And maybe I'll help. And maybe then I'll give you some of the code, or maybe you could reuse that other feature. And you start a conversation. You see how many other people get involved, and it's this complex dynamic of every time. The strategy that you need to have is, I need to do it's I don't even know how to put it into words, because it has to be a strategy that lifts all the boats to some extent. It has to be a strategy that works the best for those who contribute the most, because those are the ones that you need to make sure you accommodate. Because if they go, everything dies, right? So the biggest contributors need to be accommodated first. But you also have to make sure that those who don't contribute are accommodated as well, at least to some extent, because that's where future contributors come from. Those who use you and are not contributing anything today, from that lot, 1% of them are going to become contributors one day. And if you alienate them today, they're never going to become contributors. So you have to, you could say, this is one of those things where algorithms don't work. You cannot write an algorithm that describes, here's what you do in the community. You can attempt, but what you usually need is a spirit of how things are supposed to happen. What you usually need is, as a society, we usually solve these problems by telling stories. This is what mythology serves as a purpose in society. And it's like the stories that go around, hey, this thing happened, and that was a successful example of a collaboration. You just tell these stories around. People learn about, okay, these are the patterns that work, that get people what they want, maybe not exactly, but sufficiently. And you go and that's why most successful books about open source are those who tell the stories of, here's these contributions, we had this problem, we solved it that way, and then over and over again. So yeah, I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to balance the two things for sure. But I think a good cap is that people should try and contribute. So not everybody can contribute with a pull request. So that will be the main thing. But discussion that came up with some other guests is that people don't really realize how much help you can give to an open source project by doing non-technical things. Like, you're not a developer, fine. Offer to write a blog post. Offer to proofread the blog post, offer to help people with the logo. Maybe the Jitsi logo is great. I still have a sticker somewhere on one of my old computers has a one of the first Jitsi sticker, and which is a collector's item at this point. And
Yeah.
help, there's so many things you can help, but help not right now. Well, now we have social networks, so you know, I just realized we sound so old. It's not even funny. Like,
No, we don't just sound old. I'm not gonna say that. But
we now have social networks. Well, that's a terrible thing to say. Like, yeah, you can offer to help with of course, with the social network pages if you're not a developer. There's so much.
yeah, you know, I completely agree with you on that. Spreading the word, carrying the flag is the most underrated and activity around, and the most easily accessible, because it used to be that when you ask people, hey, what can I do? Well, you can write documentation. Really? You know, when I woke up this morning, and that's exactly what I felt like doing. Actually, writing documentation is not a suitable thing for non-technical people to do, because you need to understand the code in order to write useful documentation. You need to know what the people reading documentation would need to do. So that's a fairly involved process that more competent people can do. But what you can do as an outsider a lot is exactly what you said. You can spread the word. Blog posts are superb. That helps from a search perspective. It helps within your community. It tells the story of the project. Stories resonate with people. It brings new people in. The people who are part of the community really like having people tell these stories. So I love your suggestion about that. And then in getting involved in social networks as well. You know, people ask questions all the time. If you feel you know stuff, answer. Sometimes there's contention. You know, jump in, say a word, support the developers, show them that they have supported in the community. Very often you have people that complain within communities, and it escalates very easily because you feel, well, you're on computer, you don't really hear your voice, you feel unheard. So you're bristling, you really feel that you want to take all this rage, you have to take it out, and whatever you write, it feels insufficient. You have to make it stronger and stronger. And even when you tone it down, it's still pretty strong. So in such cases, it's actually very helpful when you see such a contention going. Go and say a kind word for the developers. You know, I kind of get where you're coming from, but these folks are doing a great job here, and I'm appreciative for that. Such words of encouragement are also very helpful. So all of that is tremendous help for open source projects.
Yeah, definitely. It's a journey. It is. It's been a while. I mean, if people think it sounds like we've been here for a while, we have. And there's people who've been here for longer, so it's been a journey. Still, it has something.
It has been. Do you remember like when we started? No one had mobile phones. Were not really a thing yet, and when they started being a thing, it's like, well, you had to triple press a key in order for it to write the letter that you wanted, and but it's also funny that. One of the, and I guess we'll be wrapping up soon, but one of the things that that kind of feel wrong lately is that we have a bunch of tensions in society today, and people are very quick to blame that on social networks, and it's somehow always the fault of social networks, and people are diabolizing their algorithms for how you're presented the next topic, and they are radicalizing people and whatnot, and I'm thinking, you have not seen what IRC forums were like in the 90s. Like, people, that was passionate. People there was a lot of hate going there, and in both directions, there was a lot of polarization. So what social networks did recently is, it's not that they actually added a new frame of communication. They essentially just democratized IRC chats and email lists to the entire world. So now everyone is being a troll in an IRC forum the way that we were. And having been on the IRC forums back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, you can appreciate that. The algorithm, it probably plays a part. But no, really, that's how we are. We just get inflamed. And what we need to learn here is it's not that the social networks really need to do that much adapting to how to save humanity. I think that's an entirely wrong path because it leads you down the path of let's start to censor people all over the place and remove content because, oh my God, it's our responsibility to protect everyone. No, it's not. People need to learn how to deal with this mode of communication where it's constantly informational Candyland. You get to consume all the content you want and only the content that you want. You know, there's no more things like back in the day, you would watch on the TV whatever's on the TV. And some of the content is exactly what you want. 95% is content that is not really what you want, but other people are interested in it. So you get to appreciate what other people want as well. So you're more in sync with everyone else. Now that's gone. Now it's all up to you to decide what you're watching. And that's, I feel, the thing that we have to learn these days is how to develop this responsibility of keeping ourselves informed for what other people need. And the tools that FreeSWITCH and Jitsi do, they help you do that. You know, they help you maintain the conversation, the dialogue with other people, and hear them out and approach everyone with an open heart and an open mind, and get to the bottom of what's bothering them. So there we are. We're saving the world. That's what it's all about.
Sure. I think just as a closing remark, you democratize communications in a big way. Same time, though, I think we're moving away from standards in a way. The standards are still there, but everybody is siloed away. So we have companies who use not open source projects. Like, well, I can say the names. I mean, there's someone who's using Zoom, so they will only use Zoom, and they won't be able to call someone that's using FreeSWITCH, or they won't be able to talk to someone using Jitsi, or they won't be able to talk to someone using Microsoft Teams even. So that's probably the next step is going to be find a way to refederate that kind of.
Yes, and you know, I actually think that federation, for the sake of the problem of just I don't want to have 10 apps on my phone in order to talk to other people. I'm not too sympathetic to that problem, because what's the big deal? You're going to have 10 apps. It's not like you have to carry them or something. Yeah. Well, we do, but it's not like they weigh anything. I actually think that the interesting place where federation occurs back is a necessary, as a potential good solution. It's not really feature-wise, but it's I just mentioned censoring, right? There's a lot of censoring happening on social networks today because there's a lot of pressure from the community toward the providers of these services to take care of certain sort of content. And like, if you have half of the United States clamoring on you and politicians threatening to do stuff to you, it's very hard to remain completely open and say, you know, I think everyone should be able to express themselves. It's impossible. There's this principle in governance that's called subsidiarity, which is roughly about the fact that every decision has to be taken at the lowest, most local level possible. So if you're maintaining a group in your neighborhood and someone's saying things that you don't want them to say, you just go and tell them, we don't want you to say these things, or we're going to get you out of our local group, and you're free to go and join other things. Like, you don't need the world to come and say you're no longer part of society. You're handling this locally. When you have these global players, you cannot alienate, you cannot localize that responsibility. It's still a global responsibility. So I think federation comes in very nicely here, because it lets you say, well, you know, we have this federated little mini Twitter. And in our case, we're not going to want to hear anything from Trump or from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like, one of those is like persona non grata for us. We don't want to hear from them. And, you know, more power to you. Do whatever you want. It's your little group. And I think federation would allow that sort of subsidiarity in the information world. And actually, I think Jack Dorsey was recently talking about something along those lines. I think that's the reason he got there, because he's stuck now. And they're probably going to get in regulatory trouble anyway, regardless of all the efforts that they're trying to put out and accommodate politicians. And I think federation is a potential solution to that.
Yeah, let's see where that goes. It was certainly an interesting chat in general. Well, Emil, thank you for joining us today. I hope we'll meet in person soon enough, maybe at ClueCon, or who knows?
Let's hope so. You know, good luck, everyone. It was a pleasure seeing familiar faces here, and best of luck to the FreeSWITCH community. Cheers.
Well, thank you so much, and well, I'll see you next month with another guest. And again, thank you.